forecast, which is going to be a forecast for 2025. We're going to look at all of the overview of 2025, and also then we're going to have a little portion of a look of January as well. And I thought I'd pull a card. I usually choose tarot, but I was feeling a bit of oracle today, so I pulled out my Yule, that's upside down, a Yule oracle deck from Seasons of the Witch. So we'll pull a couple of cards from there, I think, as well. Oh, hello. Hi, Liz. Hi, Michelle. Oh, I can't see. Oh, some people were here before me. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's 4 p.m. for me. Well, 1 minute past 4 now as we are here together. So that's really nice. I have got 4 pages of notes that I've made for this video, but they are in quite big font so that I can still see them while I'm talking to you guys as well. So, so it's not too bad. But considering on the Astrology podcast, they did just a 2025 forecast and it was like 4.5 hours long, then I think we're going to go through this a little bit more quickly. So it's going to be like a kind of broad overview, but I am still going to pull out some of the key themes as well, you know, and also dates, because 2025, like generally as a year, like it's definitely got some, it's kind of like a year that looks forward and looks back. So it's got that essence of like some big changes are happening, like all of the outer planets are changing signs in 2025. So we're definitely moving into whole different vibes. But then they also retrograde back. So it's kind of like a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of feel. I think with 2025, we're going to kind of like get a taster, but we're not going to be like running down the road. It's like, it's almost as if we kind of like got to the house and we've opened the door, or we're even like peeping through the keyhole. We can see kind of what is to come, what is coming up for us in the future, but we can't quite just burst in and kind of be in that energy fully just yet in 2025. So like in a way that might feel frustrating, but I think it's kind of cool as well, especially as it aligns with us having a 2025 hermit year as well. We're working with that hermit card energy, the 9 energy. It's given us an opportunity to kind of like get acclimatized before we really like dive into what is coming in 2026. So yeah, that kind of like liminal space. I think I did a written forecast as well for 2025. If you prefer to like digest things in written format, there is going to be linked down under this video as well, where you can go and see that breakdown, and that gives you all like the key dates and stuff like that as well. I know like not everyone wants to take notes, although I know some of you do take notes. So hello. Already a shot. Yes, every time we say astrology forecast, not astrology podcast, we take a shot. I've only got water though today, so I'm, you know, that's not going to be so fun, is it? Okay. So main themes, a year at the threshold. That is what I called my written forecast for this thing. Yeah, hydrate. So like I said, all of those outer planets are shifting. So let's go through those. We've already got Pluto in Aquarius. So that happened at the end, the end of this year. We've already experienced that transition. So Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008, in that really kind of like grounded earthy sign. It's now moved into Aquarius. Aquarius is much more about kind of like collective vision and a bright future for everybody, almost like activism vibes as well, sometimes alien vibes, like kind of futuristic kind of vibes as well. So Pluto kind of in that futuristic sign of Aquarius, it's like it's going to be a very big shift, and we're already seeing some of that stuff as far as like we've had lots of things with like AI and stuff, and I think when we see Uranus going into Gemini as well, there probably will be more of that. I'm sure they will have picked that up in the astrology podcast, so I'll take another shot. So yeah, that Pluto is about kind of like power themes and things like that, and that being in that kind of collective visionary sign of Aquarius, I do feel like it's going to be about like power in the hands of the collective, and like that can be, there's lots, isn't there, to that. There's lots to unpick with that. It's a very like long-term transit as well. We're working with that transit for like way over a decade, almost 2 decades. So we've got plenty of time to kind of like feel our way with this, but especially as like the introduction to this new transit of Pluto being in Aquarius is opposing Mars. I feel like what is actually coming up as we enter into this era, this new era, Pluto and Aquarius era, is our own personal power that we have as individuals, and then that idea of like collective power, and who gets to be able to kind of have the authority and tell us what, kind of harness our personal power. You know, like when we think about like if a country's like going to war or something like that, one of the ways that they like motivate people to want to fight in a war is by helping people to kind of like understand why that thing is important. But as like history has shown us, a lot of the time there's like propaganda, people aren't being given the full story. And I wonder if like this Mars opposite Pluto, as Pluto's going in, is entered into Aquarius, is helping us to see where and where not our own personal like drive aligns with that idea, our own personal power aligns or doesn't align with that idea of collective power. Because like it's just the fact that in our modern world now, power is very concentrated in the hands of very, very few people. Power, influence, money concentrated in the hands of a very, very tiny percentage of the people here. So there's this huge like imbalance, but they need to harness the power of, you know, those elites need to harness the power of individual people as well. So we actually have a lot more power than we realize. And I think that like kind of prolonged Mars Pluto dance is going to give us the opportunity to see where we can choose to use our own personal power in the do we fight for a cause, you know, only if we believe in it too, you know. So I think that is going to be something to look into. And like generally Pluto in Aquarius is going to be like collective shadow work around the collective shadow, you know, the kind of like collective topics of things like power, and how there are people in this world who don't have enough food to eat, and there are people in this world who are like sitting on billions of dollars, you know. So there's this huge inequality built in, and I think that that is going to be something that we're going to need to like find our own place with as we go through, definitely through 2025, but through that whole Pluto in Aquarius transit. Yeah, I've made a few notes, like questions that we'll be kind of looking at. It's like, what does it mean to belong to something? You know, like when I was saying about harnessing our own personal power for like a cause, and then also how can we build a more inclusive, authentic society, a fairer society as well? You know, that's something that we can be looking at with this Pluto in Aquarius. And so that is the outer of outer planets, or not planets in the new kind of astronomy terms of it. Pluto is now being declassified. We've also got Neptune moving into Aries. So Neptune has also been in Pisces now for ages, in its own kind of watery sign. So there's just like water and water, it's all vibing in Pisces. And then in March, we have Neptune crossing over into Aries. So instead of being in that water and water, we've now got fire and water, steamy, you know. So we've got this kind of like imagination, but being harnessed for, in that Mars rule sign of Aries, to be more like about who we are. We can start to think about and see ourselves and visualize ourselves in like in a whole new way when we get this. But again, as with, well, not with Pluto, because Pluto's not backtracking, but all of the others are. It has backtracked, but it is settled in, you know, it will be settling into Aquarius. But Neptune is going to go into Aries, and then in October back into Pisces. So it's like we kind of get that glimpse, you know, I was saying about like just kind of peeping through the keyhole. It's like I can imagine myself as something different, and then it's like, oh, but now I've kind of blended back in again when Neptune goes into Pisces. And then when Neptune does move back into Aries again, we can be into that new kind of space as well. Hey folks. So we've got Pluto moved. We've got Neptune moving, coming back. We've got Uranus moving into Gemini. So I put innovation and curiosity with this. So Uranus moves into Gemini on the 7th of July, so much further along in the cycle. Uranus, though, is stationing throughout January It's like in January it's going to be at 23 degrees. We'll talk about this a little bit when we're talking about the January specific forecast, but it's just kind of like sat there. So Uranus is all about kind of like innovation, rebellion, very Aquarian themes again, you know, that kind of idea of change, sudden change, revolutionary change. But in January, Uranus is just kind of hanging out in the same place, you know. It's like, I'm here. And if you've got any planets at 23 of, well, of any of the fixed signs, it's in Taurus, but it, you know, it will be making aspects to any of the degrees of the fixed signs there. You'll probably be feeling that. It's like there's a kind of, it's almost like it's building and building. It's like something's got to give, something's got to change, and then it will station direct at the very, very end of the month. And then it will, like I say, it will go into Gemini in June. It's very, very, in July, very, very slow moving, all those outer planets, but will backtrack into Taurus in November. So exactly the same as with Neptune. It's like we get this new glimpse. We get that kind of airy, rebellious, exciting, also a little bit like maybe very futuristic, technological kind of stuff coming in. But then it's like, oh, hang on a minute. No, we need to ground that back in Taurus before we can then move forward again. So it's, this same pattern is like repeating with these outer planets. Then we have got this whole thing going on between Jupiter, Saturn and Neptune and coming into place. We've already got the Jupiter Saturn coming in January, so we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But we've got Jupiter moving into Cancer in 2025. I'm so excited for this. It's also my Jupiter return. So Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Jupiter is like that kind of like wisdom seeking, truth seeking, very like generous, fertile. It's like the greater benefic. It gives all of the luck, all of the booms, that kind of stuff. And so when it's in Cancer, it's even more like just even more fertile, you know, able to like spread even more with this kind of like watery feels all over everything. So rich and fertile. And Jupiter at the moment in Gemini and also retrograde is like, it's like got the ideas, but it just can't like maybe like bring it manifest, I suppose. Whereas when it does shift into Cancer next year, we'll be able to have that, the conception can happen, you know, that thing that we've been bubbling on the edge of can start to happen. But like I said, that's not happening until 9th of June. Jupiter goes into Cancer. So it will bring those, also like an expansion into those Cancer areas as well, you know, like home, connection, belonging. You can look in your own chart as well. Where is Cancer in your chart? Like for me, it's my 10th house. So that seems like it would be a very like fertile year in terms of like my calling, my career, my like what I do in the world kind of thing. So I'm interested to see how that is going to play out in June. We've also got Saturn moving signs as well. So Saturn has been with Neptune in Pisces for quite a while now, a few years, and they've just been kind of like hanging out together. Saturn, unlike Neptune, is not so, sorry, Frodo's like barking at a squirrel or something in the background, is not as at home in that Pisces energy, let's say, because Saturn wants it to be discreet, as in separate, you know, structured, boundaried, whereas Pisces is about no boundaries, you know, about like blending and just taking everything in, everything being one. And so Saturn in Pisces, there's this kind of like tension between those two energies, with Saturn wanting to kind of solidify and structure things, and then Pisces wanting to just blend and merge. And so when Saturn moves out into Aries, it brings that structure and that sense of like also like staying power as well with Saturn into that Aries. You know, I talked about it with Neptune as being like that idea of self. So we get an opportunity to kind of really structure our sense of self in a new way after having that dreamy sense of not self. So if you have been feeling this last like couple of years that your sense of self is in a kind of flux or change, it's like, I used to know who I was, or I kind of thought I knew who I was, and then in these last couple of years I've been feeling like I'm not so sure anymore. Then when Saturn does move into Aries, that new sense of self, which is emerging out of those Piscean waters, has that chance to kind of like take hold. But Saturn then does the same as the outer planets, and retrogrades back into Pisces as well. When does that happen? Have I made a note of that? I'm not sure if I did. Yeah, there's this kind of like, so there's like a kind of going forward, coming back, going forward again sense as well. And it's not until like later on and even into 2026 that we start to really be able to properly move forward with these energies. It's just, we're gonna glimpse in 2025. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Liz. So Saturn retrogrades. Okay, so not until on the 1st of September. Thank you. Yeah. So, you know, we're going in, we're getting that little taster of like, who am I in this new structured sense of self? And then it's like, no, hang on, I need to like just have a little bit more of a universal spiritual kind of influence first before I take that sense of self forward into that, into 2026 really. But yes, we've got Jupiter in Gemini, Saturn in Pisces, and then Jupiter moving into Cancer, Saturn moving into, I'm doing this with my hands because in my mind I'm seeing like the chart and how basically they're kind of carrying on forming this square pattern with each other. And when we have those two planets in like a square pattern, there's definitely like a tension. And with Saturn and Jupiter, it's like a tension between wanting to expand and wanting to kind of consolidate and keep things as they are. And so it's like wanting to do Aviana, yeah, that it was not flawless, but thank you. I'm like, hang on, this makes no sense to me. Why is it January? It's like, no, it's not. So it's like this in this year with this Saturn Jupiter square that is kind of like prolonged in 2025, we are feeling that wanting to expand and then needing to kind of contract, solidify. It's like you mustn't run before you can walk. That's what Saturn wants to say. And Jupiter's just like, let's just run full speed, you know? So it's the same pattern again, you know, when you look, when you do look at the astrology of a year of like a, you know, obviously there's loads of other things going on as well, like loads of like other smaller themes and things like that, like little counter melodies. But it's rare, I think, to get a year that is so much like all saying the same thing, in that it is like it's all saying that we're going forward, then we're going back, and then we can go forward again. So yeah, it's like this weird, just yeah, liminal, I think is a really, or threshold is very much the keywords I keep kind of coming back to with this year. And like I said, it does really, really resonate with that hermit energy of like needing to pull that energy in and kindle it to ground into it before we can move on with what is to come next, kind of thing. Yeah, Charles saying sound like one purges things and figure out what's needed, then purges again. Yeah, it's like all of the time. And like we have got like we've got some retrogrades as well, like which we have most years as well, you know. In fact, I'll jump onto that now. I'll come back to the thing because that kind of goes to your point as well, really. We've got Venus retrograding in Pisces as well between March and April. So Venus in Pisces, lovely, really just extra sensual, extra juicy Venus in Pisces. And so we're having that opportunity to bring that kind of imagination into our relationships, especially like our relationship with ourselves, but our relationship with the divine as well, you know, our kind of spiritual relationships. These are things that are being really highlighted with all this Pisces stuff. And it's like we almost need to have this like spiritual connection, a heightened spiritual connection, and a we think we've got it, or we think it's going to be one thing, but then it turns out that wasn't quite the thing. So we have to kind of backtrack and then we do it again. So there's nothing wrong with that. You know, our culture is very anti-mistakes, isn't it? It's like you mustn't make mistakes, but like that's not feasible. And we actually learn so much more from making mistakes and doing things like that, isn't it? So from like trying things. And so this year, if we can like just embrace being in the flow, being in the moment, and just kind of being like, how am I feeling now? How about now? You know, and just being with that as we are going through the year, rather than trying to be too much wanting it all done already, you know, like kind of like wishing it away and being like, I just want to be like in that new energy, ready. Being in that liminal space, being in that hermit space and kindling that candle or that star inside the lantern is going to serve us. We've been given this opportunity to take this time to kind of kindle that and be ready, so that when we do move forward, we're ready, but we're not looking at that yet. We are being here with what is now, being in that present moment. Yeah. Yeah, perimenopause. It is a bit like that. It's like, is this done? Is this not done? Is it? Yeah, that's very much like that. So yeah, we got that Venus retrograde in Pisces, March and April. We've also got Mercury retrogrades every year. So we've got Mercury retrograde in Aries and in Leo and in Sagittarius. You know, like spaced through the year. But we also got this Mars retrograde that I started talking about at the very beginning as well, that is happening right now and is going to be really influential for the first quarter of the year, really. So yeah, I put like a continuation of power struggles from 2024 with opportunities for resolution and new momentum, opportunities to really like harness that Mars momentum as well. Yeah, it's, if we can be in the moment and focus on our kind of our inner work and our spiritual connection, it's going to serve us so much more than if we try and force the door open before it's ready to open properly. That's the vibe for 2025, really. And what else? Yes, we've got that Jupiter Saturn, but because Neptune's so close to Saturn in Pisces, and we'll be doing that little Pisces Aries Pisces dance, kind of not exactly in sync with Saturn, but both doing it, then that Jupiter Saturn square is also a Jupiter Pisces square, Jupiter Neptune square as well. So Jupiter and Neptune in a square, well, that's kind of more about like kind of heightened imagination, sometimes also illusion, sometimes also disillusionment as well. So we might feel like we thought something was going to be, but then it turned out that it wasn't the case. But generally, like I say, about being in that moment with it will allow us to receive the insight that we need and to really grow, I suppose. You know, like we're being challenged with growth, with that kind of collective shadow work, with Pluto moving into Aquarius now. And so we are doing that preparatory work, and if we can sit with it, then that is going to be beneficial in the long run. Yeah, we've got mid-year squares between Jupiter and Saturn, with Neptune also there. I put balance expansion with structure and navigate unclear goals. That unclear goals, that's that Neptune, you know, Neptune in Pisces, then Neptune in Aries. It's like, if we are going to set goals for 2025, they maybe shouldn't necessarily be outcome oriented goals. They may be more to do with who we are rather than what we're going to do, if you see what I mean, you know. So to set like a who I am goal is like, I am a person who has a spiritual practice, perhaps, you know, that would be very Neptune in Pisces, rather than by the end of the year, I will have, I don't know, like written a book or something like that. Do you see what I mean? It's like that kind of, it's a difference in nuance between our goal setting. And like, this is why I think it's so important to bring the astrology, bring the cards, bring all of the input into the year, because it does influence our goal setting. Like, whereas like next year, when we've got these planets in Aries, you know, we'll have Neptune will be in Aries, we'll have Uranus will be in Gemini properly, we'll have Saturn and Neptune in Aries, we'll have Pluto in Aquarius. What else? I feel like something else is moving too. But with more of that Aries, with more of that Mars, and with Mars then actually direct after all of this retrograde stuff next year, we will be more making goals in 2026 for more like individual outcomes, more outcome oriented goals, whereas for 2025 our goals are a better place to be more process out oriented goals, or like I say, more like in our who we are as opposed to what we're going to achieve kind of thing. I feel like I probably just went all the way around the houses to say the same thing. Hopefully you get what I'm talking about. And then the other major thing that is happening is that we've got that nodal shift, and that's happening you know, right at the start of the year. We've been having the nodes of the moon in Aries and in Libra for like the last 18 months. So we've been working on that like Aries theme of like self-individuation, self-actualization, against those Libra themes of like balance, cooperation, relational things. That has been like the collective kind of seesaw that we've been on with the nodes and with the eclipse happening in those two signs, and mostly happening in those two signs. And then as the nodes drop into Pisces and Virgo, we have got that shift happening to those more Piscean themes of like spirituality, of lack of differentiation, really, imagination, connection, but like not connection in a Libra connection way, connection in a very like esoteric way, really, a spiritual way, you know, that kind of like blended connection, knowing that we are literally one part of a huge whole, which is the universe, you know, or multiverse. That's that kind of Pisces axis. And then on the other side, we've got Virgo, which is, you know, the opposite. It wants to differentiate everything. It's like separate, categorize. So we've got those two opposing like factors happening in that nodal axis. And so yeah, we've got this pull on one hand to differentiate, and then this pull on this other and like actualize, self-actualize, and then there's on this other side to blend and to merge and to expand. And it seemed to me that that is another vote for that whole story of the year, which is unfolding as being this kind of like liminal, not quite here, not quite there kind of space. Yeah. What did Kate say? Kate said something good. Sounds like a good year to set up systems rather than specific goals. Yes, to set up, maybe not even systems, like to set up, I don't know, I suppose Saturn in Pisces. But yeah, setting up systems. I like that. I like it. It's like putting things in place that support us to be where we are, rather than trying to like kind of propel ourselves into the next thing. We're always like propelling forward. No, this year is not about that. It is about finding ourselves where we are now, truly finding ourselves, the depth of ourselves in where we are now, and then we can take it forward. Hey Brandy, sorry, my chair's getting a bit squeaky. So yeah, that nodal axis shift is a really big deal as well. And like I said, there's obviously other things happening with lots of other things, you know, going on through the year. And in the written forecast, I go into that a little bit more detail. I do want to give you just like a few little things of like some of the major months. Like January is kind of like a tense month, and we will talk about that, especially like at the very beginning of the year for sure. But we'll talk about that like on its own. But March, with Neptune going into Aries, and we've got a total lunar eclipse in Virgo, we've got like March is a very like kind of like healing, almost like a kind of like healing and finding our new selves kind of vibes in March. And then in April, we've got Mars again, the last Mars-Pluto opposition, kind of finalizing that cycle that's happening during a solar eclipse in Aries, which we also had last year as well. It's like it's all about like kind of endings and beginnings, which is also very Pisces. Pisces is very endings and beginnings. 9 as a card, as a number for the year, is also very endings and beginnings, isn't it? It's like coming to the end of that cycle. Yeah, that Mars Pluto with the solar eclipse is like there's a tension that is kind of like in amongst that in April that we'll be navigating when we get there. So March kind of a little bit more dreamy, but it's like kind of dreamy and having more insight into the future. And then April like tense. And then June and July, we've got Jupiter moving into Cancer, which is beautiful, encouraging that growth, nurturing, especially in those Cancer like home, family kind of areas, and also in that area of your chart. And then we've got Uranus in Gemini, bringing all that kind of like sparky, like curiosity, innovation, technology, all that kind of stuff. But we've got Saturn retrograde in Aries, kind of slowing things down, being like, right, hang on, guys, slow down, Uranus. We need to kind of like put some better structures in place to support that. Otherwise, it's just kind of like pie in the sky kind of thinking, you know. And then in September, we've got Saturn retrograde, which is what Liz said. I thought I'd written it down somewhere, which kind of steps away from the tension that had been kind of like set up. But then we do get a total lunar eclipse in Pisces as well, giving us that opportunity to really like surrender into the liminal. Yeah. Yeah, sharing shenanigans, but we can try to chill in the liminal. Exactly. Let's chill in the liminal. Let's kind of be fluid in this year. We'll be fluid, we'll kindle our flames, and we'll just be in the liminal space, in that kind of like, in that like amniotic fluid, really, waiting, not, but growing. I mean, that's what happens, isn't it? Inside the womb, we're growing. We're not just like doing nothing. Really amazing stuff is happening, but it's kind of happening in that liminal space. And that individuated self is not going to emerge until a whole year later. Sorry. If you've got a lot of Mars and you're being patient, you'd be like, oh, this is not fun. This is not cool. But yeah, I mean, it is just what it is, really. And then we've got December, we've got Uranus, Neptune and Saturn all coming direct in December, which give us that kind of clarity and momentum that, like 2026, yes, momentum is much more of what is going on in that year. Whereas this year, no, you know, that is not the case. It's like a little bit forward, a little bit back, a little bit chilling, you know, it's, yeah. So what did I put for practical suggestions? I've got engage in shadow work, with especially with that that personal and collective power dynamics, with that Pluto going through Aquarius, and also the Mars Pluto oppositions, and then like Mars will be coming up to kind of like square Pluto as well. Balancing idealism with grounded action, especially with that Neptune and the Jupiter and Saturn squares. So there is like going to be a really big idealist, imaginative vision for the future, but then it's like, how can we also make that practical, make it real, putting those systems in place like Kate was talking about, and propelling in 2026. I like that. And then with Jupiter in Cancer, focusing on what is important, focusing on what matters as well, building supportive structures, I put there as well. It's like, we need a home base. You know, we need a base that feels safe to us. And so cultivating that home base, especially while Jupiter is in Cancer during the summer in the Northern Hemisphere, then that's going to be really juicy and supportive for us moving forward. And yeah, that Virgo Pisces nodal axis, the kind of work that I put down, the practical steps to go with that. Release perfectionism. Note to self. Release perfectionism. Embrace faith, cultivate balance, but definitely that whole there's definitely an air of surrender going on with that, especially with that North Node in Pisces, you know, surrendering that need to control everything, because that's usually the root of, like, I think that's like a Zen saying, is it's like the root of suffering is not the suffering itself. It's like the trying to control it is what causes the suffering. I'm totally butchering that. But hopefully you get the vibe of what I'm saying. It's like, it's our attachment to the outcome of things, and our attachment to how things will turn out that causes us to suffer, rather than the actual thing that happens or doesn't happen, you know. So yeah, it is. Shell says, a wonderful ripple effect to heal and get clarity while hermiting. Yes. So we're all hermiting, we're kindling our flames. I think it's like, it is a vibe, and it is going to require like some shifting of mindset to be able to be in that space, because it's not a space that we see as being like, it's not a productive space, is it? It's like it will look probably from the outside kind of unproductive and frustrating, but it's all about how we sit with that energy that is going to be, that will determine what sort of year we have, really, you know, and we get to choose that. So what did I say? Yeah, 2025 invites us to stand boldly at the threshold of transformation, preparing for the new era ahead through deep introspection and intentional action. So we can take action, especially when we've got some of the planets moving into Aries, but don't probably like expect that action to really like take hold, to stick necessarily, until the year is up. Yeah. Abriana says that lands good. I like the quote, in life, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Yes, feeding that into the hermit. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Yes, that is, I think that's like kind of an adjacent quote with that, like what I was trying to say of how we kind of create our own suffering, really. Ah, okay, it's Michelle. That makes sense. That definitely helps. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so should we have a look at January? That is the full forecast for 2025 in 35 minutes. I'll have a little sip of water. Obviously, there's lots more nuance and detail, and you can go and watch the astrology podcast one, take a shot, if you want like lots of pontificating around the things, which I'm totally here for it. I haven't watched it yet. I'm kind of saving it. I mean, it's obviously going to take a while as well, isn't it? Even watching it on more than one speed. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But that is the kind of overview. And that's what I wanted to get across really, is more of the feel of the year rather than like this specifics, because I will give specifics as we go through the year. You know, I do specifics in, well, like in Moon Day Magic Mail, every Monday I send an email with the specifics for that particular week. I don't know how you find it, but for me, it feels like too much. Sometimes having like the whole details of an entire year in one go is like, whoa, you know, I need to have that broken down a little bit more. And so I like to have it like a little bit at a time. Okay, Liz is saying they do stick to the big topics, but they've obviously got much more to say about the big topics. I think they go into more detail about like the particular transits and sometimes like when this transit happened before and things like that. Yeah. Do I have any quick bits to mention for those of using yeah, that's a good point, Michelle. I think I've got mine somewhere here. If you are using the Vision Your Year, especially the Astrology Extra little booklet, which I printed out to work through here. Like I gave an overview similar to what I've talked to you about here today in the start of that. You know, I've written that up in the threshold there. So it goes through all of the major kind of transits and gives you the key dates for the year. What I would recommend doing, if you're able to, like if you know your chart well enough, and like lots of people do watch kind of more astrology forecast type things like this, I know a lot of you guys do know, is to look at, especially like I'd be looking at like, where is my Pisces house? Because Pisces is getting a lot of stuff going on this year. Also, where's my Virgo, you know, like what house is Virgo for me? Because that's where the nodal axis is, but Pisces especially, because that is where a lot of action is taking place with Saturn there, with Pisces, with Neptune. I keep saying Pisces and Neptune, with Neptune and Saturn there, and then with Aries. So that like cusp between those houses, like are they houses 3 and 4 for you? Are they houses 7 and 8 for you? That's going to give you a very different flavor for the year. So have a look into that, you know, like what is my Pisces house? What is my Aries house? And that kind of back and forth between those. And then you could also do the same between your Gemini and your Cancer house. So that would make sense too. So that we've got Jupiter in Gemini at the moment. Jupiter will be moving into Cancer later on in the year in July. So Jupiter at the moment is expanding. Well, it's actually like retrograding, but kind of expanding backwards in our Gemini houses. And then it will be like coming back forward through our Gemini houses and then just sloshing into Cancer and just being like, I've arrived, you know, in Cancer. So those two houses as well. What are those two houses for you, and what themes are those planets bringing up? And then especially when we've got Uranus also going into Gemini, so we've got that Taurus to Gemini area being activated as well. I mean, you could, like, it's good to kind of like map out all of those things, but I think especially looking at definitely the outer planets and then bringing that into Jupiter and Saturn as well. And then you can start getting a little bit more granular, like especially with Mars being retrograde, I would be looking at like Mars and the Cancer and Leo part of my chart. But yeah, you know, like you can just drill it down and drill it down. And I do take you through how to do a lot of this sort of stuff. Well, not all of that actually, but that's something for next year in here. But looking at your Time Lord as well. Carol's saying our natal houses, yes, and Liz is saying yes, in your natal houses. So if you look at your natal house, like we've talked about Saturn, say, leaving Pisces for Aries, that is, you know, we've all got Saturn moving from Pisces to Aries. But if Pisces is your 12th house and Aries is your first house, and so you're moving from like that kind of like spiritual house of the 12th and then moving into Aries, which is a much more defined personal house, that's going to really emphasize those Pisces to Aries transition. Whereas say it's your 4th house and 5th house, then that's going to feel very different, because when you've been having all of those activations in Pisces in your fourth, you've been getting really like feeling into touch with your roots, into those kind of fourth house, home, ancestry, those sorts of areas. And then when those planets start to move into Aries, it's going to be activating your fifth house of like joy and creativity and children and kind of play. And so that Aries is not going to be so much about self-actualization. It will be still a little bit, because it's still Aries, but it'll be bringing more those fifth house themes coming through. So you can apply this stuff to your charts if you know this. And yeah, we're going to learn the houses. Those of you who are here, who are on doing the Astrology Foundations course, houses is going to be next. We're going to do a little bit more chart reading first, but we are going to then go into houses. Then we'll do aspects, and you will have covered all of the pillars, and you'll know how to do all of this stuff. Carol's, so second and third. So Pisces as a second house. Then the sort of Piscean themes that can be coming up, that kind of Saturn being there and Neptune being there, is maybe brought to kind of like wanting to structure feelings around like your financial security. And I know that is something that you have been working on, your like finances, restructuring your finances. But also there's like a sense of like kind of not being able to fully structure it, with Neptune being there as well, and with it being a Pisces, that house being Pisces for you anyway. It's almost like things flow out as fast as they flow in. But when it moves then into Aries, into your third house, well, for a start, they've moved out of, sometimes interesting to look at the fact that those planets are now not in that house anymore. So that house is no longer having those activations. That's as important really as where the planets have now gone. But you've got those planets then being in that third house, activating those third house themes of like your local, your kind of community, the people you talk to, the places you go, the people you see on a day-to-day basis, also like siblings, things like that as well. So there's so many ways that we can apply it then to our own chart. So yeah, in here I've got like the personally impactful transit. So like for me, I want to be looking at what my Time Lord is doing, and like the booklet explains how to pull out your Time Lord and work with that. But then also like where some of the big shifts that are happening in your own chart as well is a really good way of doing, like a helpful thing to do as an overview of your transits for the year. Yeah, I would love to create like some more resources around that as well, but it's like kind of niche in a way. But yeah, it's something I'm definitely I love the workbook. I think I've done a really good job on it, but there's more stuff that we could do with that for sure as well. But I don't know whether really it would be better as like a course or a workshop or something, because sometimes it's easier to learn that way. I don't know. Anyway, that's things I've been thinking about for the future potentially. Anyway, let's have a little look at January. Oh, Brandy's saying about the class. Yeah, sorry, Brandy, we've started, but I am building it all up in a portal, so there will be future runs of that class as well. Yeah, I'm glad that you're enjoying the Astro Masterclass. I think more like what I want to do is like practical astrology class, like a class where you can apply this stuff. So like we could get together and we could all be looking at our own charts and how the astrology for the year kind of matches up with our own charts to kind of get those themes kind of thing. Practicums. Yes, I love that. I love that. That is really, really cool. Definitely that kind of thing. It's just like having the time to do all of this stuff. I really want to do that. So let's have a look at January. So like I said, it's kind of tense, especially the very beginning of the month as well. Like we've got that first week, and like I know in the US as well, that's going to be kind of a fraught week. And like looking at the astrology, it's like, yes, that maps, that tracks. And we come into that new month and that new year with that with Mars retrograde and with that like Mars Pluto stuff kind of in play. But we've also got Venus coming into Pisces, and it's like, oh, thank you, Venus. So it's not all awful, we've got that dreamy kind of softening. Like it doesn't take away the fact that, I love it when Austin talks about this as well, like quite often Chris on the Astrology podcast, take a shot, Chris will quite often say, so do you think that this nice transit will counteract that kind of harsh transit? And Austin's always like, well, no. They don't counteract each other, but they do counterplay, don't they? We have some nice things and some hard things at the same time, you know, and that's like basically life, isn't it? It's like we'll have some areas which are going smoothly and we'll have some areas which are, you know, not quite as we want them to be. So yeah, I think that Venus in Pisces is like, oh, thank you, Venus, for that as we start into the year. I think for me, what I'm seeing in that first week especially is like, if it feels a bit like heightened and overwhelming, then taking some solace in creativity would be really just so nice, you know. Finding something, or even like taking solace in like, what else is like Venus in Pisces, like sensual experience, spiritual experiences as well, taking like being like hermiting in with your tarot cards, something like that would be really nice to do over that first week. Brandy says Kindred University. Kindred University, oh my gosh, yes, we'll have Kindred University and we'll have like theorem courses and practicum courses. Oh my gosh, my heart is just like maybe that's what that Jupiter return might all be about in my 9th house. I'm absolutely loving that. That is so cool. I need to make notes of this so I don't forget. Yeah, what was I saying? I got totally distracted by that then. That's very Gemini as well, isn't it? But yeah, that Venus, feed that Venus with some gorgeous like spiritual experiences, and just like Professor Jessica, you guys are cracking me up now. And then we've got Mars going back into Cancer on the 6th, like literally on the 6th of January, which I know is the I think that's Inauguration Day. Yeah. I put resurfacing feelings of vulnerability or powerlessness, which yeah, I think like I said, there are some challenging things, especially in that first week of January. And then on the 11th, we've got the node shifting. So I already talked about this now when I talked about the whole year. That nodal shift from that Aries and Libra axis into that Pisces Virgo axis is going to feel, I find with the nodes sometimes it does take like a little while for us to settle into them, especially like getting some moons or some eclipsey action going on with the with that shift. But it definitely does, there's a vibe change, definitely. Okay, Liz is saying the inauguration day is on the 20th, which is when the sun conjuncts Pluto. That's interesting. Okay, yeah. Why did I think the 6th then? That's funny. Yeah, sun conjunct Pluto. And that's interesting, isn't it? I think because I think Trump's like Leo rising as well, isn't it? So that kind of like power and personality, like individual core self of sun, like that would be really interesting to kind of pick apart. That would be a really good astrology practicum as well, wouldn't it? looking at that. Yeah, so not until later on. That's interesting. Okay, so and then on the 13th we've got the that's why I was thinking the 6th. That's when there was that insurrection. Yes, thanks Liz. Yes, so the 6th is kind of looking turbulent again in 2025, I think, but probably more like for internal worry. I think with that Mars retrograding into Cancer, it's more like we might be more worried about things than actually pans out in physical happenings, kind of thing. Yeah, but we'll see. But that full moon in Cancer, oh my gosh, this like is so ripe and so juicy. And yes, there are some things going on. We have got that Mars Pluto, we have got that Jupiter Saturn square, but I'm still loving that Cancer moon, that moon ruled moon. It just looks like so juicy, especially for that with withdrawal and like renewal, rebirth of self. I think it's just so potent in that start of the year. It's like it's like a baptism into the energy of that year, into that kind of like liminal ebbing and flowing energy of the whole year. January actually is a really good like condensed view of what the whole year is going to feel like in a lot of ways. Yeah. Maybe we should have a look at some of those folk charts. Yes. Yeah, and Liz is saying that the astrology podcast did do a deep dive into it. Renewal, Pam says yes. Okay, well, Pam, on that full moon, that Cancer full moon, please do some kind of like, I'm going to definitely do like a bath ritual I try and do that every Cancer full moon anyway, but like especially on this one, it just is going to be so beautiful for like release and renewal then, you know. Yeah. What else have we got? On the 19th to the 21st, we've got the Sun going into Aquarius, meeting Pluto, and we've also got Venus conjunct Saturn. So like that's not so fun for Venus, apart from because it is in Pisces, she's kind of like got the upper hand on Saturn in that respect. So it's like she can kind of harness Saturn's power and discipline for Venusian themes. So there is that kind of softening to that whole, sorry, someone's knocking the door now as well. My husband's here, he can answer that, we're going to ignore it. So yeah, Sun coming into Aquarius, going into that place, that Aquarian place of that kind of ideals, idealism, meeting Pluto, which is like, I'm holding all the power here. How does you, again, bringing that kind of like personal power, collective power, like standoff kind of to the forefront kind of thing, which is really interesting that that is around actually the inauguration time. There's that kind of personal power, collective power tension between those two things. But then Venus conjunct Saturn being able to bring some kind of, we can bring our own divine feminine energy into setting up routines and things that will serve us in the last week or so of January. And I feel like I'm not even like January, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be like, I'm just going to soften my way into the new year. I'm not going to be like, I need to get everything ready before, you know, like there can be that feeling of like, I must have it all prepared before the 1st of January. Otherwise, like the whole year is going to be just shit. And I used to really beat myself up around that. And over the last like, a few years now, I suppose, I have been able to give myself, I give myself really to like Imbolc usually, sometimes even until the spring equinox, to actually start putting things into practice, because like the new year happens deep in Capricorn season, you know. It's like we aren't supposed to be making things manifest in the new year. It is supposed to be our fallow time. It's supposed to be our dream time. So why are we trying to force it through when that is not what the vibe is, you know? It's just because somebody decided that this is the calendar new year. It's like it's not embedded in the seasons and cycles. Like the cycle is a Capricorn, it's an earth internal feeling space. We are manifesting, but we're doing it like we're planning, we're doing that kind of like restructuring of ourselves, ready for doing the external work kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, it's such a beautiful year for renewing spiritual practice, like with all of that Pisces activation and with the nodes being there as well. I think all of us are going to find that we need a spiritual North Star, you know, in 2025. And so those of us who are already gravitating towards these sort of practices, we've already got a head start, haven't we, in that area. But people are going to feel really lost if they don't have that. And that can happen as well with Pisces, because it does, like I say, merge and blend. And then if there is no anchor point, and especially when like Saturn moves out of Pisces, there's no groundedness in there at all then, you know. There could be the pull to kind of lose the self in like unhealthy ways as well, like in alcohol and drugs and things like that as well. So having a spiritual anchor is something that will be really helpful to cultivate this year. Yeah, and that could be an intention that we set with that Cancer full moon, because like that node shift is being very much picked up by the astrology of the full moon as well. Yeah. Okay, what else have we got? We got on the 23rd, we got Mercury opposite Mars and also trining Uranus. So communication is going to be very like loaded and also quite surprising, perhaps. Like things might come out, you know, that we didn't know about before. Sometimes there's a tendency for people to use communication as a weapon as well, rather than using communication to connect, using communication to hurt. So that is something just to be aware of in around that, like coming towards the last week of the month. And then we've got that new moon and Uranus, which has been stationing all the way through the month, just kind of like I say, like hanging out there. Will actually station direct. Like it doesn't really move for a little while because it's, you know, but in theory it's direct at the end of the month. So we've got that new moon in Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus in the modern system. You know, Uranus is the ruler of that. So it's an Aquarius new moon ruled by Uranus, which is turning direct on that same time, you know. So innovation, surprising, even rebellion and things like that. It's like that end of the month. If you've been feeling like, oh, this is a bit of a slow start to the new year, and then we get to that new moon at the end of January, and it's like, oh, hang on, this is surprising. This is a bit of a curveball, you know, as we get to the end. But yes, also we've got the Sun, Jupiter there as well, connecting with each other, which does give us that like optimism, expansion. I feel like going into February, we'll probably be feeling more like buoyed up and optimistic than we will perhaps going into January. Like January and like the end of December, beginning of January is not optimistic. Let's say it can feel like a little bit more heavy, you know. So yeah, that new moon at the end, it's almost like that could be like the start of the year then instead, you know, if you use that Aquarius new moon. But we get lots of chances to like reset and restart, don't we, as we go through the year, for sure. Okay, and like I am using that Capricorn new moon. We're going to be having a ritual. I know lots of you here have got the Vision Your Year workbook, and we are having a live ritual to close out and make space for the new year on Monday, on the new moon, on the Capricorn new moon. So yeah, there are definitely things that we can do with that Capricorn new moon energy as well. I made like a whole video about the Capricorn new moon, which is came out yesterday. So yeah, if you haven't watched that yet, you might want to watch that one. Going into the details of that moon and doing a reading for that Capricorn new moon. So I'm just shuffling the cards. This is our seasons, well, my Seasons of the Witch Yule Oracle. And I'm going to pull, I think I'm going to take 2 cards for, this is going to be for January, I think, like a reading for January rather than it being for the whole year ahead. I haven't pulled, like I pulled up a 3-card spread like I suggest in the Vision Your Year. I did do that, but I haven't pulled a full 12-month year ahead spread yet. And I'm not sure if I'm going to. So we'll see. Okay, January cards. Oh, these are nice ones. So that's kind of nice. We've got Silent Night. I'll read you what it says in the book from here. The rhymes are kind of weird on this one. I find some of the decks in this series like a lot better than some of the others. But yeah, it's got, if by night the world should sleep, a sleep so deep the silence be deafening, there would sound nothing at all nothing would sound. So they're kind of like riddles. And then the other one is Ornaments. And it says, so it is, a remembrance of what once was and with what will be, a fragile beauty beaming upon thy. And they do feel kind of like, we've got that quietness, that stillness, but we've also got, what did I do with the guidebook? I did pick that up. Oh, there is. I know that there's also like a light here and brightness and beauty. And I think we've got that opportunity in January, especially with that Venus in Pisces, to be able to bring some of that beauty, that sensual, just brightening things up to, and also creativity as well, and how we place things, how we have a lot more agency. We can get sucked into that like Mars-Pluto opposition and get sucked in, like co-opted, conscripted into other people's power struggles, or we can choose our own adventure. And like, I fully endorse the second option rather than the first. So let's do Silent Night first then. Okay, so the keywords for this one are meditation, peace, stillness, which are very on point for starting up with that hermit energy for sure. You're being guided to pause, to reevaluate your situation. Now is not the time to move forward with your plans just yet, and you may even find your goals coming to a complete standstill. Maybe this is a reading for the year in general. Something isn't working, and you need this time to reassess your progress before moving forward. You may even need to release your situation altogether and consider a new path to your desires. Silent nights offer further guidance. Take this time to meditate and find inner peace. Again, very, very hermit coded. You could be stuck in old or repeating patterns that have created blind spots where your situation is concerned. Perhaps you're investing in a situation that has not repaid you for some time. Or it may be that you've given more than you have to offer, and it's time to cut your losses. Consider this pause a blessing and take this moment to shift your perspective. I actually feel like that is a really good summary of the whole astrology for 2025. It is like a moment to pause, to kind of reassess, to kind of look at where perhaps we are giving too much of ourselves away, and to, perhaps surrender those things, cut our losses with some of those things, even though that seems really hard to do, especially when we've poured so much of ourselves into them. But take it, if we can, take it as a blessing and sit with it rather than try and force our way forward when that is not what is indicated now. Then that will see us through this year so much better. Let's look at ornaments then as well. So the keywords for here are reflection, memories, and intent. That's what the card looks like. Really beautiful. For some, ornaments are more than yearly decorations. They represent traditions, shared memories, and the hope of passing them along to future generations. These fragile little orbs and shapes may only come out once a year, but when they do, they provide small moments of joy to remember, reflect on, and have hope for the future. Take a step back and review your Christmas tree of success. Ornaments guide you to think and reflect on your situation. Is this something you want to continue putting your efforts into? Is this something you wish to see in your life next year, or in 5 years, or 10 years? Are you making choices that align with where you imagine yourself to be? It couldn't be like underlining the other card anymore, could it? It's like these two cards are saying very, very similar messages. Like the astrology of the year gives us very, very similar messages. Like ornaments, you have to move things this way and that until everything falls into place. If your situation feels like something you'd like to keep around for years to come, then keep doing what you're doing and trust in the process. If not, it may be time to make some different choices. So that is the point, though, is that we get to make the choices. We get to choose. We don't have to get sucked into the power plays, power struggles that are around us in our environment right now. We can bring our energy in, we can hermit, we can especially take that full moon, that Cancer full moon, and renew and really lean into our spiritual connections, find our spiritual anchors as we move into January and into 2025 as a whole. So that is it. I will take a photograph of these cards and I will share them in our Discord server. Hopefully I put a link to our Discord server in the description, but I might not have. If you want to join and you're not in there yet, then let me know and I will put a link if there isn't one there already. Thank you so much for watching, for hanging out with me. I will see some of you later in Journal Circle, which I'm really looking forward to, some of the members. And sending you so many blessings for 2025 as a whole, and also for this January, where let's choose our own adventure in January. Thank you. Bye.